I think it's safe to say most gamers will agree that God of War is one of the most iconic franchises in video game history. It's a property that Sony holds in very high esteem, very high regard. When you think of first-party PlayStation franchises, you think of God of War, you think of Last of Us before anything else, and Sony wants to make sure that absolutely never changes. With Ragnarok's launch long behind us, I know that's crazy to say, and the next series reboot still years away, fans of the series are starting to wonder how long they're going to have to wait until they can play as Kratos again. And in this video, I've got some news to go over with you that recently came out that suggests you may not be waiting as long as you think. God of War 6? Welcome to the channel, everybody. Chaos here. Do me a favor, make sure you drop a like. Make sure you guys are subscribed to the channel. Stick around for the entire video. We have a lot to go over. That's right. Seems to be a secret God of War project in the works at Santa Monica Studios right now, and if you're a fan of the franchise, you're going to want to hear about it. So let's get into it. I mean, if you're excited for the future of God of War, you should stay that way. We're going to cover anything that develops from this and, of course, God of War 6 down the road. So in case you were somehow out of the loop, God of War Ragnarok made an absolutely stupid amount of money. According to official reports, the game sold over 5 million copies in the first week alone. It's currently the fastest-selling PlayStation exclusive in history of all time. But the success did not stop there because Ragnarok went on to sell over 11 million copies in the first 3 months on the market. I know, it's insane for a campaign-only game. They're dead. They don't do good anymore. Then you have Elden Ring, you have Zelda, you have God of War, you have Last of Us. It's just crazy, these campaign-only games that just can't hold their own, right? Wrong. Anyway, 11 million copies in the first 3 months on the market reportedly drove a massive surge in PlayStation 5 console sales thanks to it being bundled with the system at that time for retailers. Ragnarok launched on both the PS4 and the PS5, and I think a lot of people were planning on buying it on the last-gen console simply because of how hard it was to buy a PlayStation 5 at the time. I mean, when it launched, Sony must have figured out something just in time because according to the reports, Ragnarok sold over 82% of its copies on the PlayStation 5. Needless to say, it was a runaway success for Sony. It's only natural they want to keep that hype flowing, but the success of Ragnarok kind of put them in an awkward position because in case you forgot, this was going to be the final game in the Norse mythology saga of God of War, making it pretty difficult for them to actually capitalize on the game's success since another series reboot is already in development. So how do you keep milking the Norse era of God of War where the developers have already stated they're done with it? Well, there's a way, my friends. Before we get on to that way, there's another way. The link is at the top of the description. Go follow my TikTok. If you like food reviews, challenges, if you like hobby things like sports card breaks or just real life travel, get over there, guys. We are growing every single day. I would love to see you guys over on the channel. Now, some have speculated there will be some kind of paid DLC for Ragnarok that continues the story. And while I don't think that's totally out of the question, I think it's something we would have heard about. Now, granted, Sony has been getting a little more generous with their paid single-player DLC content, as evidenced by the Horizon Forbidden West expansion that launched earlier this year. Typically, paid expansions for video games come out within the game's hype window, which is usually within the first 6 to 8 to 10 months or so. However, with games taking much longer to make now, that window is widened, and Horizon Forbidden West got a paid expansion over a year after its launch. And remember, God of War Ragnarok sold way more than Horizon Forbidden West did. It was also confirmed not too long ago that Elden Ring's first major paid expansion is in development. Now, that game is almost a year and a half old at this point, which is crazy. Time is flying by. Meaning, its first expansion will be launching around its 2-year anniversary, which is pretty insane when you actually think about it. So, Ragnarok may very well be getting a paid expansion in the near future, and I think that is truly the plan. We'll get an official announcement within the next few months, possibly at the rumored PlayStation conference happening in the fall. Just the other day, something actually happened. Something very interesting happened that seems to suggest there's something else in works for Kratos and the gang behind the scenes. There is something lurking in the shadows. A few days after the May PlayStation showcase, it was reported that Santa Monica Studios had opened a job listing for a new senior gameplay designer. Now, that's not weird, but the details within the job description are what caught everybody's attention. The job listing says the new hire must have knowledge of God of War 2018 and God of War Ragnarok, and be able to speak in depth about the mechanics of those games. The job listing also says the new member of the team will be in charge of companions, suggesting that whatever they're working on would have a detailed companion system. The point is, this new gameplay designer will seemingly be working on some kind of new adventure set in the Norse timeline of God of War because otherwise the job listing makes absolutely no sense. They need someone who knows the combat systems of the Norse-themed games and will be in charge of a companion system, which sounds an awful lot like God of War 2018 and Ragnarok, and yet we've been told up to this point that the next God of War game will be God of War 6, set in a brand new location and presumably with brand new combat mechanics. Plus, God of War 6 is believed to already be in production, or at least the early stages of it, which means this new person will not be working on that. You may call me a bit of a conspiracy theorist, I get it, but if you ask me, this new job posting for Santa Monica Studios more or less confirms they're working on something that we didn't already know about, and it's going to be set during the Norse era of God of War, which is massive news, and that kind of throws a wrench in what we were previously told by Sony. This all raises one big major question. Is the secret God of War project an expansion for Ragnarok? Or is it a new spin-off game entirely? Over the last few months, there have been rumors floating around about a possible spin-off game for Ragnarok that would have you playing as one of the side characters, fill in the gaps of the story, or potentially having you play as Kratos again in a less dramatic adventure that also allows you to get some more out of the combat before we leave it behind. Spin-off games used to be kind of a tradition in the God of War franchise, the most memorable of them being God of War Ascension, which launched on the PS3 in 2013, and it served as a prequel to the original trilogy. The gameplay is pretty much identical to the main trilogy, features that crazy hack and slash combat that it was known for, and it was a great way to hold players over between God of War 3 and God of War 2018. So what if Santa Monica Studio is doing that again, pulling out the old playbook? What if God of War 6 is the next mainline game, but they're also working on a spin-off game set in the Norse timeline that will give players one last opportunity to experience this world before we leave it behind? This would also mean the previous rumors we heard about certain characters returning would actually be true, because in case you missed it, several voice actors from Ragnarok have made statements in interviews that really make it sound like they're coming back in the near future, which obviously wouldn't make sense for God of War 6, since that game is going to be sending us somewhere totally new. People are predicting Egypt, new mythology and everything. Another possible explanation for the job listing is that long-awaited paid expansion for Ragnarok, but I'm honestly not sure if that's what's going on here. Don't get me wrong, I totally believe a paid expansion is being discussed at Sony and Santa Monica Studios, and I'm 99% sure it will be announced in the near future. I just don't think that's what that job listing was for. Think about it. If a paid expansion was in the works for Ragnarok, do you think Santa Monica Studios would just now be hiring for a gameplay designer? If that was the case, that would mean the expansion likely hasn't even gotten off the ground yet, and I don't think that's a reality. Also, I don't think Santa Monica Studios would hire a new gameplay designer for an expansion to an already completed game. That's just not really how game development works. If the studio is hiring a new gameplay designer, it means they're going to be working on a brand new game, not an expansion to a game that is already finished. I mean, does that mean there's not going to be any Ragnarok DLC? I don't think that's necessarily the case, but also, if Sony is ordering a Ragnarok spin-off game, don't be shocked at all if the plans for a paid expansion end up getting scrapped so they can focus more manpower on the new game instead. Now, I'm about to get super tinfoil hatty here, okay? I actually have one more theory as to what's going on, and honestly, it's not that far-fetched when you think about it. Ragnarok was a runaway success for Sony. It drastically outsold the 2018 game during its launch window, and Sony wants more out of this timeline whenever they can get it. We know God of War 6 is planned to take us somewhere new, but what if the overperformance of Ragnarok has caused Sony to change plans? What if I told you that God of War 6 is now actually God of War 7, and Sony has ordered Santa Monica Studios to immediately start work on another Norse-themed game, and that will be God of War 6? What if Santa Monica Studios is actually working on two mainline God of War games at the same time right now, one of them being the series reboot, and the other being an unplanned follow-up to Ragnarok? Think about it. Sony and Santa Monica, they can come to an agreement that Ragnarok will be the last Norse-themed game, and they're all on the same page, so once work on Ragnarok wrapped, they started moving on to God of War 6. The God of War 6 team is assembled, early development begins, and they're all ready to leave the Norse timeline behind and look to the future, but then all of a sudden, Ragnarok does way better than they expected, and there is a huge demand for more content during this timeline. So the two companies have an emergency meeting. They come to an agreement that they have to make a third Norse-themed God of War game, but they won't disturb development on the planned God of War 6 in order to do it. Hence, the job posting for a new gameplay designer going up last week. So effectively, God of War 6 got pushed back and is now God of War 7, and the next mainline God of War game turns the Norse duology into the Norse trilogy. I know. Am I off base? Am I digging deep? Or am I onto something? No matter what happens with the next God of War, it's almost certainly going to be an exclusive to the 9th generation of consoles, so if you don't have a PlayStation 5 yet, you're probably going to want to start looking for one. Ragnarok launched on both the PS4 and the PS5, and while that was a solid chance from a marketing perspective, it's no secret that Sony wants to leave the last gen of hardware behind. I don't blame them. I mean, the PS4 launched in 2013. It was running off hardware that was already a year old at the time. So obviously a new AAA first-party Sony game, I mean, it's not going to run well going forward. Granted, some companies have managed to work some magic on the old consoles, like the recent PS4 port of Hogwarts Legacy, but the next God of War game, whatever it may be, not launching for 2 to 3 years, the PS4 will basically be a flip phone compared to the PS5. So if you want to keep playing God of War and you don't have a PS5, you might want to look into it. Let me know what you guys think. Which possibility ends up being true? I'll see you soon.